You are standing in your driveway with a quote in your hand. Solar panels on the south roof, an inverter on the garage wall, and then the line that stops you cold. Battery storage, $18,000, 10-year warranty. 10 years. You do the arithmetic in your head, the way you do arithmetic when nobody is watching. 30-year mortgage, 2 batteries, maybe 3. You fold the quote and put it in your shirt pocket, and you go inside and you do not mention it at dinner. Now let me put you somewhere else. A machine shop behind a white farmhouse outside Gap, Pennsylvania, Lancaster County, a quarter-mile off the blacktop. Diesel engine turning at a lazy 800 RPM, a flywheel on the crank the size of a wagon wheel, and a leather belt running up to a line shaft under the ceiling that drives every tool in the building. The man who owns it is named Amos Byler. He is 68 years old, and when I asked him what happens when the engine hiccups, he looked at me like I had asked what happens when you blink. Nothing happens. The wheel carries it. That wheel is a battery. It has been a battery since 1911. It has never been replaced, never degraded, never once been shipped back to a manufacturer, and it will still be storing energy when everything in that $18,000 quote has been hauled to a recycling facility twice over. I want to be honest with you about how I got here because I did not come to this clever. I came to it broke. I put panels on my roof in 2019. I did everything the salesman said. And by the second winter, I was watching my meter spin backward all afternoon while I sold power to the utility for 4 cents and bought it back at 16 after dark. And the only fix anybody would offer me was a wall of lithium that cost more than my truck and came with an expiration date printed right on the paperwork. I paid for the panels. I could not pay for the privilege of using them after sundown. Amos does not have a battery. He has a wheel, and he has a second one now, smaller, spinning inside a welded guard in the corner of that shop, charged by a little solar array on the buggy shed. He built it with his son. He built it because a battery salesman came out from Lancaster and quoted him a number, and Amos, who has run a machine shop for 40 years, walked the man out to the diesel and pointed at the flywheel and said, "I already own one of those. Why would I rent one?" Here is the science, and it is not complicated, which is precisely the problem. Energy stored in a spinning mass depends on 2 things: how the mass is arranged and how fast it turns. Speed matters enormously because the energy climbs with the square of the rotation. But arrangement matters just as much, and this is the part almost nobody gets right. A pound of steel at the rim of the wheel stores 4 times what a pound of steel stores at half the radius. 4 times. Same weight, same speed, 4 times the energy, purely because of where you put it. The old foundry men knew this in their hands before anyone wrote the equation down. That is why every antique flywheel you have ever seen is heavy at the edge and spidery in the middle. It is not decoration, it is engineering. And nothing in that arrangement wears out. There is no chemistry. There is no electrolyte drying out, no dendrite creeping across a separator, no calendar aging ticking away in your garage, whether you use the thing or not. There is steel, and there are bearings, and bearings cost $30. The paper trail on this is long, and it is public, and it is embarrassing. The potter's wheel in Mesopotamia is a flywheel. Kick it once, the mass carries the rotation while your hands do the work. James Watt bolted cast iron flywheels to his engines at the Soho Works in Birmingham in the 1780s, and the entire Industrial Revolution ran on stored rotation for 100 years before a commercial battery existed. In 1953, the Oerlikon Works in Switzerland put a 3-ton flywheel under the floor of a city bus, charged it at the stops from an overhead post in under a minute, and ran routes in Yverdon, in Ghent, and in what is now Kinshasa. No fuel, no batteries, a spinning disc, and a schedule. In the 1990s at NASA's Glenn Research Center in Cleveland, engineers spun flywheels on magnetic bearings in vacuum, cycling them tens of thousands of times looking for capacity loss and not finding meaningful degradation, because there is no chemistry there to degrade. So why can you not walk into a hardware store in Ohio and buy one? I want to be careful here, because this is not a story about villains in a back room. It is a story about money moving downhill. In 2011, a company called Beacon Power finished a 20-megawatt flywheel plant in Stephentown, New York, 200 wheels in one building, doing frequency regulation for the grid, doing it well. That same year, the Federal Energy Regulatory Commission issued Order 755, which finally told grid operators to pay resources for how accurately and quickly they responded rather than just how much they moved. That order should have been a gift to flywheels. It arrived in October. Beacon filed for bankruptcy protection the same month. The physics never failed. The financing ran out 1/4 ahead of the rule change. And look at how the incentives are written today. The federal residential credit is built around battery storage rated in kilowatt hours of capacity, with a minimum size threshold. If you buy a lithium pack, a percentage comes back to you at tax time automatically, no argument. If you weld a steel wheel into a frame in your own garage, you are on your own. Nobody wrote you out of the law on purpose. They just wrote the law with a battery on the table in front of them, because there was a trade association in the hallway with a folder of factory job projections, and there is no trade association for a spinning wheel. There is no marketing budget for a piece of steel that lasts 50 years. Nobody ever went public selling something you buy once. Now, if you were sitting there thinking this is for men with acreage and a welder and a barn, stay with me, because the next part was written for the person with a 2-car garage in a subdivision and an HOA that cares about the color of the mailbox. Here is what a modest unit costs. A used steel rotor, and I want you to buy steel, machined and balanced, not something poured in a plywood mold in your driveway, will run you $60 to $140. A large brake rotor, a lathe faceplate, a scrapped industrial pulley from a machine shop's discard pile. Something in the 40 to 70 pound range with the weight out at the edge. A 1-inch shaft, $20. 2 sealed pillow block bearings, $25 for the pair. Angle iron for the frame, $30. A treadmill motor, which is a permanent magnet DC machine that will both spin the wheel up and generate on the way back down, $30 to $60 at any secondhand store in America. Belt and pulley, $20. A charge controller, a small pure sine inverter, a fuse, wiring, call it $100. You are between $250 and $350, and no permit in the country regulates a piece of shop equipment bolted to your own garage floor. But you do not skip the guard. A spinning mass holds real energy, and if a bearing seizes its speed, that energy has to go somewhere. You build a steel enclosure around it, you bolt the frame to concrete, you keep the belt covered, and you keep the speed modest. Mass and radius, not RPM, is where a home builder should look for capacity, because doubling the speed doubles the stress problem in a way doubling the weight does not. Treat it exactly the way you treat a table saw, with respect and with the guard on. And be honest about what it does. Bearing friction means this wheel bleeds down over hours, not weeks. You will get 3 to 6 useful hours after a full charge. That makes it perfect for the gap between sunset and bedtime, when your panels have quit and your house is still awake. It is a poor choice for a backup system that sits idle waiting for a storm. It is an excellent choice for capturing the afternoon production that is currently going out to the pole for 4 cents. Now here is the piece Amos did not volunteer, the piece I had to sit through 2 cups of coffee and a rebuilt hay rake to get. Everybody who builds one of these builds it wrong the same way. They chase speed. They find a light disc and they spin it up to 5,000 and they get vibration, heat, and screaming bearings. And 6 months later there is a rusting frame in the corner of the garage and a man telling the internet that flywheels do not work. Amos builds them slow and heavy, and he loads the rim. On the small unit in his shop, he bolted a ring of steel around the outer edge of the rotor, bar stock, drilled and through-bolted right at the perimeter. And that ring, which weighs less than 1/3 of what the disc weighs, does more than half the storing, because radius squared. He runs it under 2,000 revolutions per minute. It is quiet. The bearings run cool enough to keep your hand on. And then the detail that actually decides whether the thing lasts. Balance it, not by eye. Spin it up, mark where it shudders, and grind or shim until it stops. Amos does it with a dial indicator in an afternoon, and he says a wheel that is balanced properly will outlive the man who built it, and a wheel that is not will eat a set of bearings every season and convince you the whole idea was foolish. Same steel, same motor. One works for decades and one dies in a year, and the entire difference is a Saturday with a marker and a grinder. That is what got lost. Not a machine, a habit of thought. That you can own the thing instead of renting the thing, and that a competent man with a shop and a weekend has options a salesman would rather he not consider. So here is what I want from you in the comments, and I want it specific. Tell me the size of your solar array in kilowatts, tell me what time of year your production peaks, and tell me the one load you would most want to carry from sundown to bedtime. The freezer, the well pump, the lights, the CPAP. I read them. I am building a chart of what people actually need to bridge, because the answer changes the size of the wheel, and I am not going to guess when I can ask. And subscribe, not because it helps my numbers, because there are men and women in their 50s and 60s and 70s right now digging their grandfather's methods back out of the ground, and every one of us who finds something puts it back into the pile. That is the whole arrangement. We share what we find, and we do not let it get buried a second time. Next week, I am going to Sugar Creek, Ohio, to show you the compressed air system that runs an entire Amish household. Sewing machines, blenders, well pumps, all of it, off a single tank and a diesel that runs 90 minutes a day. It is not new. The patent architecture behind it dates to the 1870s. It never needed a wire, and the whole install runs about $1,100 for a house that already exists.